Good morning, everyone. This is a virtual meeting of the Finance Committee for Newtown Township. If I can, just for how we're going to take public comment today. We will be taking public comment as we have been taking public comment for the all of our virtual meetings. We take public comment one of four ways. You can make public comment by dropping off public comment in the blue drop box that's in front of the township building before you go up the stairs to the library entrance. I will say I just checked that box a few minutes ago, and there was nothing in it related to public comment. There's two other ways while on the Zoom meeting itself. You can raise your hand virtually, not only by phone, but also by the screen if you've logged in by computer, and we will recognize you if you have done so, if you were wishing to speak. And if by chance you're unable to raise your hand, or you're having some difficulty technology-wise, you can always send public comment at newtowntownship.org. Again, that's public comment at newtowntownship.org. With that, if you're having problems raising your hand or problems on the screen, just please make sure you list your phone number that you've called in with or your screen name so that we can recognize you and allow you to speak. And then, of course, you can just make public comment at newtowntownship.org, and if that's how you want to do it and you don't want to speak publicly. So those are the ways that we'll take public comment today during this meeting. And I'm going to turn it over to the committee so that they can select a temporary chair.
Well, the good news is, Larry, more people are now on the call. What process we follow, Steve?
So if somebody just wants to make a nomination as a temporary chair, and then we can start moving that process through.
I'll make a motion to nominate Jim Lancelotta as the temporary chair.
I would second that.
All right.
So
favor of that?
I take it through the agenda now, Steve?
Yeah, is everybody in favor of that? Just as long as everybody's in favor, just say aye real quick. Yep.
All right.
All right, great. All right, Jim, we're going to go through the agenda. The only person that's not here is Lisa. I don't know if you want to wait till Lisa's here to do your appointing of officers. If you do, that's fine. And then we could just go through the other things. We could do roll call and those kind of things, and then move on from there.
Yeah, she comes on at 8:30, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll hold off on that then.
Yep.
So we should move down to, well, I guess a moment of silence is appropriate.
Yes.
Okay. Leonard, how about you lead us through the Pledge of Allegiance?
All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America
and
and
to
to
the
the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty
and
and
justice for all.
justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, we need to approve the agenda. So is that a first and a second, Steve?
Yeah, you need a first and a second.
Okay.
I'll move to approve the agenda as listed.
Second, we have a second, please.
Second.
Thank you, John. Okay, we're going to defer the election of board officers until Lisa's able to join us. Anybody have an issue or concern about that? Great. Any public comment on the agenda items?
I do not see any in our mailbox.
Okay.
And
I
I
don't
do
see
not,
any in the mailbox. I don't see any hands raised. And as I said, the mailbox out front of the building was empty. Well,
Okay,
no public comment in it.
good, good.
It wasn't empty, but
Now do we have a review of the previous minutes since they're since we were still an ad hoc committee at that time? I assume not.
You don't have any official minutes. You'll have official minutes starting now,
Okay,
this
Got it.
meeting.
so there's nothing to, I'm doing an outstanding job so far, by the way.
You're
You are.
doing great. You're
You
doing
are.
Tell
great.
you what,
Let me tell you.
this may be in the first paragraph of my obituary, how effective. All right. Any reports?
Yeah, sure. So I can take it from here. As you know, I try to give out the summary detail of what's happened in comparison to last month or in comparison to last year. So I just wanted to go over some highlights to point out to the committee. So overall, our revenues are up. I'm going to use approximate numbers, approximately 130,000 in comparison to March of 2020. In addition, expenditures are up about 68,000, putting the township approximately $65,000 ahead of where we were in March of 2020. Some key factors for the uptick in the revenue, an overall increase of about $48,000 in real estate collections, even though we sent the real estate bills out a few weeks later in 2021. Some of the larger mortgage companies actually were more prompt with their payments, leading to an increase of about $48,000. There's still about $1.2 million left to be collected in 2021. The big ticket item is the category of other taxes. We saw a very small decrease, when I say very small, in comparison to a yearly budget, of about $9,000 in real estate transfer, but we saw a spike of about $395,000 in real estate transfer tax. As I'm sure many of you know, the mainline health building transferred, and we actually saw the money come in March. In addition, the township saw an increase of about $21,000 in grants. We had the recycling grant come in earlier in 2021 than 2020, causing an increase of about $42,000. But on the contrary, the snow removal contract we received earlier in 2020 than 2021. So when you net it all out, we're ahead about $21,000 in that. So if you do the math, the items that I just talked about, that puts us up about 460,000, but we're only showing an increase of about 130. So as I said before, the revenues and expenses were up. So there were three main categories that the revenues went down in. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to follow some notes that I have instead of reading directly off the report. As you can see, interest is down about $9,400. This is just purely interest rates from the pandemic. The second one is charges for service. They saw a decrease of about $10,000. This was purely the timing of an allocation. What we do is we collect a permit processing fee, and then we allocate it back when the permit's actually paid for against the correct revenue account. So even though you see a decrease of about $10,000, it just gets recategorized in the public safety category. So last but not least, public safety is down about $316,000. This is directly related to permit revenue. If you look at the line by line budget worksheet, our permits are down from 2020, and that's because of the Porsche permit. Primarily came in February of 2020. We haven't had one of those big ticket permit items come in yet. So that's why we see a decrease. So now on to expenditures. Expenditures are showing an increase of about $23,000 for administration. Almost the entire increase can be related to the timing of contractual payments to our computer and software people. I'm sorry, not people, third-party vendors. The payment was made in the first quarter of 2021, but was made in the second quarter of 2020. So the expenses are eventually going to net out. We're not actually showing a decrease. We're just showing it. I'm sorry, we're not just showing an increase. We're showing an increase between months, but like I said, they're contractual payments that will happen later in the year. Public safety also shows an increase of about 29,000. This is health insurance related. Once again, this is due to the timing of our medical insurance payments. The police obviously have the most individuals, so their health insurance payments are greater. That's actually seen throughout departments, but you just see a major increase there because there's so many people. And the big, I'll sum it up. The major contributing factor to the public works increase is snow. As I've talked about, these other expenditures will catch up. They're mostly contractual. If everybody remembers, I know it's a full year ago, but we had a very, very mild 2020 with minimal, if no, snow events. If you remember a couple months back, we were getting 2 and 3 snow events for a couple weeks. Adds up very quickly. So since there was no storms in 2020, and we had multiple, the winter storm expenses, your snow removal overtime and your salt are the 2 main expenses that we can obviously control expenses, but we won't be able to recuperate them because they're not contractual. These are expenses that kind of went out with the winter weather. But overall, those are just the main highlights of the revenues and expenses in comparison to 2020. So I just wanted to update the board or the committee on that.
Thank you.
And if anybody had any questions, obviously, feel free to ask.
Yeah, I actually have a question on the reporting side, just something I'm curious about. When I was looking at the reports you guys provide, and I know they're standard and they're produced for you, but one thing I thought was always interesting, I saw this when I was on the school board too, we never did year-to-dates. It was against budget and against the prior year. No, it was against current budget and the previous year's budget. Is that right? Is that the way you guys report it, Rich?
So we have current year-to-date and previous year-to-date, and we have budget versus budget.
So yeah, and see, the key thing I'm focused on is, there we go.
That would be the other one shows that.
Got it, because the view, the way I've always done things in business, I only care about how I'm doing against my plan. How I did against last year's great, but how I'm doing against my plan is key. So I know we have a lot of different looks. I was just curious how we're doing that.
So I believe this one might capture the information that you're looking for.
Correct, and that gives me, that. Now, it doesn't give me, I guess it does give me how we're doing against last year. Okay, that gives it, perfect. Thank you. I appreciate you pointing that out.
Yeah, and if anybody on the committee has any suggestions on how to improve the reports, we're always open to it.
I think the thing that in government, I think the 2 things that you're always watching, it is important to watch against budget as most important, only because, that is where we think we're going to be, and that's where we're authorized to spend based on what the board has passed. The thought that, looking back at last year, as long as we're ready to take out things that are different within years, because, a lot of times, excuse me, we'll have a grant or something one year that we're not having the next year, or we'll anticipate a single capital project that may drive up expenses one year that we're not having another year. And so in government, you tend to use your budget as your benchmark, which I think is what you were actually saying, Jim, is that you're going towards your plan, and our budget is our plan.
And that makes sense. And I guess my challenge is, and I look at it, for example, and now I remember my question in more detail as I look at this, is that you show the budget, which is great, and you show where we are year to date. Is there a view that says, all right, through, I assume this is through March. So through March, year to date, we've spent $765,000 on salaries and wages. Where is that against the plan for those same 3 months?
Gotcha. Yeah, when we budget, we don't budget by month. We only budget by year. We've looked at it. We could probably do it for expenses. We would find it very hard to do that for revenue.
Is it too variable?
It's too variable, particularly, like we were a little late getting out taxes, and that could drive distinctly where we're going to be against what we collect, because it's 60 days from the date that she mails them. So, and we were late this year because of the county, not because of something that was in our control.
Well, and
And,
plus on top of that, then you have postal issues. So
yeah, well, yeah, which is added to a whole nother issue this year.
Yeah. Okay.
But it is something that we talked about. Larger municipalities do tend to budget per month for cash flows, issues. Most small municipalities that I know don't, but we can look at that if that's what the committee is interested in.
Okay.
Rich, I had a question. Is it too early to tell whether or not we're seeing a net downward trend in the real estate tax as a result of the appeals on the reassessment for the people who got increases and no effect for the people that got decreases? Is that overall, is that something that you're tracking or seeing an indication that that's happening?
So are you talking about the tax payments, or are you talking about transfer tax?
No, I'm talking about the countywide reassessment.
So I think what he's asking, Rich, is based on the fact that people are appealing their reassessment, and we're assuming that some of them are winning that assessment and going and getting a lesser assessment. Have we been tracking that downward trend? Because nobody's going out and saying, hey, you assessed me too low, please increase my assessment. At least I don't think anybody's doing that.
Right.
So I think that's the question.
So the answer to that is not directly. No, we are not. But we're required to track payments paid in protest. And I have noticed that there are exponentially more payments being made in protest this year, which requires you to put 25% of their funds into a different account. And it's not, you can't expense the funds until, I guess, the appeal is resolved.
Okay. Is that number that's being reserved, is it meaningful or is it within an accepted range?
It's becoming meaningful. And I say this because it's a lot of the commercial properties that are paying in protest. Obviously, like we talked about, I don't believe I've had one resident actually pay in protest. They've all been commercial properties.
Okay.
And they're
Tend to be larger bills.
yes, exactly.
And is it the expectation of the commercial properties that you expect them to be?
Is it who we would expect them to be? Is that what you're asking? Yes,
Yes.
is exactly who. Yeah.
Just a curious question that, may have popped into somebody else's head.
But yes.
Okay. Yeah, you guys have a different customer focus when it comes to that kind of stuff, I think. Now, for now, it's just an accounting exercise, correct? But the question is, and it's fairly unprecedented, what's it going to look like next?
Yeah, we knew going into this year that what's interesting is the commercial properties are the ones that are screaming the loudest in regards to the ones that are appealing and paying in protest. And yet from the analysis between the school district and ourselves, it's actually more of the burden has been placed on the residents.
Yeah.
I'm saying that correctly, right, Rich?
Yeah.
More of the burden is, so like if we were 50% and 50%, we're now 55% residents and 45% business. And I don't remember the exact percentages, but we've had that shift. But some businesses had huge increases. And I've talked to some appraisers and they said, when you have your headquarters building as your building, it's not uncommon for that building to be way more expensive per square foot than just renting office space in a shared building that's not necessarily a headquarters building. It just drives a bigger piece. So we'll see. It'll be interesting to see what happens as we start moving through all of that. The answer is, can it be significant? If it becomes something that we end up not being able to spend all year, then that becomes a significant piece.
But if there's no other questions, that was those are my monthly reports.
Thank you, Rich. Okay, next on the docket. Thank you for scrolling it up.
I would recommend, if I'm sorry to jump in, I would recommend we skip 12.1 as
That's
well.
what I was gonna say. Yep. Yeah.
Until you have your full committee, and then let's go ahead and start the other, and then we'll swing back.
Okay.
I would like to make note that Tina, I do believe that Tina is on.
I think she's been on and off a couple times.
Okay. Okay.
I've watched her come up and leave and come back. So.
All right. Want to talk about budget outcomes? Rich, is that your topic?
I believe it's going to be a combination of Steve and I.
Yeah. So let me jump in real quick, and then Rich can kind of help fill in the gaps. So just so this committee's aware, the township went through a strategic plan process really at the end of 19 and into 20. Well, 19 and then into 20. And we started using the strategic plan as the basis for some of what we did last year in budgeting. This year, we're saying it should actually really drive more of what we're doing in budgeting because we have the results, and it should set us in the process for what we need to do. And so we are going to look at what the outcomes were and that we intended to achieve in each of the areas from the strategic plan, and use those as the basis for helping to set our goals for 2022. I'm sorry, we're in 2021. For 2022, and the steps that we need to take. And so as part of that, there's two things that we're going to want to look at. One is we believe that this is a really solid presentation of what the public expects from us to have happen because of the process. And if anybody's not familiar with how we did the strategic plan, I'd be happy to spend some time talking to anyone about that. But it was a very public process. They met with, I believe it was 70 different groups around the town. They met with, they sent out a survey to 70, I think it was 7,300, 7,400 surveys. We received 1,500 back, which is an incredible return for a survey. And
they also ran the polls. I don't mean to cut you off, but they also had everybody at the primary election. They had stations set up grabbing people as they were coming in to vote, and there was a contested primary that year, so it was a good opportunity for everyone.
Yes, and so it was. There was a lot of exposure publicly that they had through the process, and so I just make note for the record that Lisa has joined us, and so. Anyway, all that being said is I think we have a solid basis to understand what the expectations of the public are. So as we start going through this process, this will stay forward in front for staff and the board in making decisions. But we still believe that, within each year, there needs to be a public process and a spot in which the public has a chance to weigh in the direction that we're headed. So these are the outcomes that we're looking at as the basis for determining our budget for 2022 and also through 2025. So this is where how we're laying that out. So we wanted to run this by the finance group, get a chance for you to have a chance to kind of see this and then make any comment that you may have or thoughts that you had related to that. as we then start looking at the process that we're going to go through for 2022's budget. We're getting ready to start actually coming up in May. We're going to start the process. And I'm going to, Tina, I've just muted you. We're picking up some air noise. So, and so we're going to do that and set up that process. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But I wanted everybody to have a chance to really understand that how we got these outcomes. These aren't just kind of picked out of thin air. These were a part of that strategic plan process. Any questions about that or any concerns about that?
Yeah, I would just like to add one thing to what Steve said. We were talking a lot about performance goals and measures at our last meeting, which wasn't public, but this is what Steve and I envisioned setting our performance goals and measures based on would be some of these outcomes.
Okay, I'm going to have us jump over to the process, but I thought you needed to understand what this was before we did. And then we'll talk about the process. Lisa, just so you know, we've not reorged organized as a committee yet. They temporarily elected Jim as the chair. And so we were waiting for you to be able to join us to do that. So we're going to finish this part of the agenda, and then we're going to jump back and do those pieces.
Hey, Steve, before you move on, you might think about in communicating with the community, the residents, getting these goals back out in front of them and relating it to the budget process. You know, we understand this, but will the general public, the majority of them, not be even familiar with the strategic plan? So in one of your community magazines or something, try and show these goals and relate it to the budget process early on.
Yes.
You know, and that's a really good point, Larry. Like in my time, I've spent a lot of my career building corporate strategies and pushing them through organizations, you know, big ones, 20, 30,000 people organizations. You can't remind people of these things often enough, nor can you make them prominent enough in the things that they say. So the ways we could do that are myriad and need to be continual. It goes back to our whole conversation about our assessments for real estate. Doesn't matter how many times you tell them, you're still going to get it wrong.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you.
One of the other things I was thinking about relates to capital, and realize, you know, there'll be an expectation, there'll be a presentation of what the capital budget will be for 2022. But I'm more thinking about there are probably some very large one-time items that are on the horizon, and you don't necessarily have them fixed to a year, but along the lines of public awareness, things like the fire truck, so that people won't be surprised when that surfaces and it's now front and center.
Yeah, so interesting you said that. One of the things that Rich and I have been specifically talking about and spending actually quite a bit of time, we actually sat through two half days of training last week related to capital improvement plans. So in what we actually started doing, I guess it was probably back in 2016 and 17, we put together a little bit of a part of a process that we were doing there, and it's kind of fallen a little bit by the wayside, mostly because we didn't have the direction of what the strategic plan is to really set the priorities for our capital. So with now that being, we're going to bring that back and enhance it some, and then look at how we present that on a regular basis with the capital, so that people understand not only are the things that we're actually going to be able to do, But what are the 10 things or 15 things that are kind of laying out there that if we had all the money in the world would be projects that we would be doing? Some of those are stormwater related, some of those are traffic calming related, and some of those are actually, driven by other outside issues. Like, for example, we set aside $1 million. I think it was my second year here, maybe or sooner, or the third year, for replacement and or dismantling of the 3 dams in town, because we knew that's got to come, that's got to happen, and we have a master plan that a committee is working on for Greer Park, and we'll be applying part of that money for that purpose, to help address that dam. Fortunately, our dams are not what they call
Structurally deficient.
well, they're structurally deficient, but it's the issue of downstream, the damage they would do if they burst. And I forgot the name of the term right now, but if your dam could cause damage to property downstream, it has a higher, it's rated higher for repair than if one it's like what we have, that would just, it would cause a problem, but it would do erosion, but it wouldn't directly impact somebody's house. And so that's what we have. All right, so I'm going to move over to the process real quick, so we can see that. And Rich, I'm going to let you talk through that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So the first thing, and when we're talking about this, keep our discussion about the outcomes and performance measures in mind. So the first thing that we were thinking is having a public meeting. This will be with the staff and the supervisors to discuss the outcomes and specific goals for 2022. After this, the staff would need to work on what's needed to go into the budget based on the supervisors and staff and goals set at the first meeting. At a public meeting, and the next, the Board of Supervisors review the performance measures set by the staff and approve or amend them. After that, that would really start the nitty gritty of the department heads sitting down with each other and filling in line items, what they need to achieve these goals. So the department heads would sit down and discuss what's needed in the budget, pretty much on a line item level. That would be an internal process. After that, we would have a very rough budget based on the goals that the supervisors directed us to achieve this year. We'd have our performance measures outcome. And then at that point, that's when we would get the public involved. We'd have an informative public meeting saying this is what we're striving for. We sent out a survey in 2019 saying we want to move this way for the next 5 years. So based on the strategic plan and the goals that we want to achieve this year, this is the way we're leaning towards. It will be more informative. So at that point, the department heads would still go back and refine everything, fill in their budgets. That's an internal process, and then we would have a capital or outcome-based presentation on the capital. That would be the next. And I just want to make note: the reason that 7, 8, and 9 have operating personnel or capital or outcome-based budget is because we're still working with software to make sure we're not biting off more than we can chew with the outcome-based presentations. There's just some internal things we need to figure out with our software, how we're going to actually report on the outcomes based on the capital, operating, and personnel. So after those 3 presentations took place, it's kind of very similar to what we did in previous years. You would have a combined presentation with all the budgets. At the next meeting, if the board is on board, they would give us permission to advertise. At that point, our 20 days starts. So looking at the calendar, There's always going to be a meeting in between permission to advertise and passing the budget. That's when we come back and present minor modifications. This is usually the part in the year where we get the hard costs. We get quotes from insurance companies, but the minor modifications are really the quotes, the contracts, things like that that get signed, and we get the firm numbers. They're built in the budget. They might not be the exact dollar amount, but that's when we usually present that. At the end of the day, we'll give one final budget presentation. If the Board of Supervisors elects to, they would pass the budget, and at the next meeting, we would pass the millage rate and the fee schedule based on the budget passed at the previous meeting. So in a nutshell, that's what we were thinking for the budget presentation, the budget process this year. It's going to get started much earlier this year than it did in previous years, which I feel like I say every year. I mean, I believe when I started, we started in April. I'm sorry, not April, August timeframe, but now we're discussing budget in April. I didn't think it was possible, considering I can still ramble off some presentations I just gave 3 months ago, but here we are talking about it.
Well, what Alex, Jim, and I can tell you from the school board perspective, we passed the budget in June, and then we'll pass, one school year budget in June,
Yep.
and then we're talking about the next budget in September already. So
Yeah, absolutely.
you can feel that pain.
Yeah.
And I think that as we look at these, with having the guidance of the strategic plan, we do need to talk about it sooner. And we do need to start really laying it out earlier on. I'm always amazed when I listen to these townships or municipalities that say, oh yeah, we start our budget in October. And I'm thinking, I don't know how you do that. And because one of the most important things we do is plan the budget, because it sets the direction of where we're headed for the next year. So.
Okay.
I really like
Is there
the
any
idea.
question? Go ahead.
I like the idea of going over the outcomes with the department heads and really getting them to sort of own their own budgets. That seems to help empower people. And I'm not sure how much of that has been done in the past, but I've seen that work very well as an approach for getting ownership and commitment.
I will say that we try to do that quite a bit. We've been trying to do that since I've been here, and they may have done it before. But what I will say is that when you do it based on the outcomes, not only is there the ownership of the dollars, but there's now also ownership of what's going to happen with those dollars, and it takes a little bit different approach. And so I appreciate that comment.
Excuse me, everyone. I've got to leave. I'll say I'm fine with either meeting schedule.
Thank you.
Thanks,
All
John.
right. Thank you.
Let's hope we don't have a tie-breaking vote now, John.
I know.
All
All
right.
right.
Should we go back in?
Yeah, I think unless there's any other questions on our planned budget schedule, we could jump back to the top.
Sounds like a plan to me. All right. So Lisa, the fun day you met, I was given the role of Al Haig. Several critical moments in the development of this team.
I didn't see you jump up on the podium, Jim.
Exactly.
Pressure's on.
Vice presidents be damned. I am
Shane,
in charge. So we should now have an election of a chair of this august tribunal. And is the appropriate way to do this, Steve, just to go ahead and have somebody nominate for the chair, and then we ask for a first and a second?
That is the appropriate way, yes.
Okay. I am now taking nominations for chair of the Finance Committee of Newtown Township.
Well, based upon your exemplary performance this morning, I will nominate Jim as the chair of this committee.
I appreciate the audition. Anybody want to be foolish enough to second that?
I'll second.
Thank you, Lisa. All right. So it be ordained.
Just go ahead and do a vote. Go ahead and do a vote for your committee.
Okay, damn it, the damn vote always gets in the way. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Any opposed? Yeah, I know, Leonard. God damn it. Okay, so I'll start with my 5-year, $3 million a year deal.
Back up.
Or we'll just continue with the time served. Okay. Thank you very much for your faith, Larry, and I'm sure I will let you down. Okay, we need to elect a vice chair. Any nominations?
One of the things I was thinking about is Larry and I have been sitting on this committee from inception. And Larry, Steve, I don't know how long we've been doing this. I was just
Great,
thinking,
I forgot. Oh.
it's gotta be,
Probably about 5 years.
okay. So for term of service, I'm thinking about whether or not does the public want new faces or do they want these old faces just to continue on?
So if I'll just take a moment. Rich and I, when we went through, in the order that you were put on this committee is the way we set it up. So the way this is going to work is that each of you would serve a 5-year term. However, on the first go around, you don't typically, not everybody serves a full 5 years, so that you can end up having a staggered term. And so you and Ed, you and Larry came on, I think, right at the same time. So Rich absolutely, I think he flipped a coin.
I made somebody draw straws, so I had a witness.
So he had somebody draw straws for the witness. And I think, Ed, you're serving out the remainder of this year. And then you could be reappointed by the board if you chose to serve again. Larry, your term would end in 2023. Lisa, I think you were the next on, if I remember right. So your term ends in 2024. Alex, I think you were the next. And so your term ends in 2025. And then Jim, 2026 is how we did it. And that's what the board passed by resolution when they set up the committee. And so we did that just to have stagger. And also if somebody's, obviously anybody can, we've had people say, hey, I can't fulfill my term, and that's fine. The board would appoint somebody else, but we just needed to do that. And so if any one of you goes off, somebody would fill your unexpired term and until that term expired, and then we would go from there. So we did give it a term basis, and people can be, the board has the right to reappoint or pick somebody new. Does that answer your question, Ed?
Yeah, it does. And I was also thinking about, not that there's a clamor in the public to jump in on this meeting, but I'm thinking now as this becomes more, the awareness of this group and its publicity, that we may see folks actually come out. So I'm getting at is, I don't know whether or not, are we in the way? Are Larry and I in the way right now where other people want to join this committee?
Actually, from my perspective, I love the fact that you have the experience base you have.
No, I appreciate that, Jim, but I'm just thinking, just in terms of the nature of how the township is changing and all the new folks that are coming in and people like yourself jumping on, I don't want it to be like, well, that's just the same old people.
Well, I think that's why we have the terms now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it phases them out.
And
Yeah, I think that if you still feel that way, Ed, come whenever your term's up. I forget. I apologize. I don't know who's up in a year and who's up in 2 years.
Yeah, it'll be up at the end of this year, and then Larry's the end of next year.
So the way that we've done it for the other boards and commissions, Ed, is that hopefully now the concrete plan is in September, we start blasting out what boards and commissions are going to have vacancies or which ones, and when I say have vacancies, meaning which seats are going to be up, then the individuals are given the opportunity to let us know whether they want to be reappointed or not. And then we do interviews. Even if they want to be reappointed, we still do interviews for everyone. So at that time, if you still feel that way, then, you can kind of come to that conclusion. But I will say, I will actually kind of reiterate what Jim just said there. I think that as this is becoming a more public meeting, and I do think that once it starts gaining traction, you will have more and more individuals from the public start coming. I think it is important to have individuals who've been on here with a more historical perspective, outside of just Rich and Steve, but residents who've been on this board. So I can tell you that there's no discussion on the Board of Supervisors to push either of you guys out. And quite frankly, we're very appreciative of your service.
The old Groucho Marx. I appreciate that. Thanks, Leonard.
Yeah, I'll add on that I appreciate having you as part of the committee. Both of you have been so great with history and just the knowledge of all the years and what's been happening. Being newer, it really helps.
I have to say it's been invaluable for us as a staff to have the experience that both of them have had within our community. So I agree with you. So I do believe that Jim opened it up for nominations for vice chair. So we probably ought to at least move forward with that part. So was that, Ed, was that you volunteering?
I mean, with me going off at the end of the year, I mean, I'd be comfortable being vice chair if folks felt comfortable with that, but obviously then it would require, starting rotation on those positions come the next year. But
I will state, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I will state this though. Every year this committee will rework, just like every other committee of the township, and you will select a new chair. I mean, it may be the same person again, but you'll select a chair, you'll select a vice chair, and you'll select a secretary.
I mean, I would serve, Larry could serve. I'd be more than happy. I don't want to nominate myself, but.
Well, then I'll
I'll
nominate.
nominate Ed.
I'll second that nomination.
All right, sorry, I'm back. Vote?
Aye.
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 So by the way, my apologies. I am multitasking on meetings. Like I just got pulled into one. So I'm gonna have to speak in a few minutes. So if I go away, it's only because I got pulled into a call.
All right. You probably should go ahead and elect your secretary.
Okay, any nominations for secretary of the Finance Committee for the Township of Newtown?
Nominate Alex Skoukas.
I second that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Call vote.
Aye.
All right. I'm sorry, somebody have something to say?
Oh, boy. No, I just said, oh, boy. I've never been the secretary of anything. I'm wholly unqualified in this role. But I'm happy to do it.
The good news is that staff will help tremendously to help move forward.
Oh, I'm happy to learn.
And I believe we've got to settle on the meeting time.
Yep, I'm trying to move back down there. I'm using the wrong mouse.
Well, as you can tell by my multitasking, Monday mornings at 8 are awful. I actually have 3 calls at 8 o'clock. So I prefer to do 5 in the afternoon if that's possible.
So if I can just throw a wrench into this to speak not for Tina, but on behalf of Tina in a way, we have this, I think this would also correspond with the supervisor meetings as well, wouldn't it, Steve? Those Monday.
It's the third Monday, so it's the week off of your supervisor's
Okay,
meeting.
never mind then. So we moved it. Okay, but would that would still be, no. Okay, never mind. I'm thinking of the municipal authority, but we usually
It
don't
is
have
the municipal authority if they have a third meeting,
Got it. Okay.
if they have a second meeting. this would actually, I have an EAC meeting that meets at 5 o'clock on the first Monday. This is kind of like filling that hole on my third Monday if we have a municipal authority meeting. So,
Steve, Tina just texted me. She said she can't talk. She wants to be unmuted.
oh, sure. I don't know that I can unmute her.
Yeah, whoever leads the meeting should be able to go in and do that.
Well, I am leading it. I mean, but she has to actually do it. There you go.
There, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Hello, hi.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm in the car, so I'm trying to be conscious of not the turn signals and stuff like that. So, but back to the dates again. What are the dates again? I'm sorry, the times?
It's either 5 or 8. I mean, yeah, 5 at night or 8 in the morning.
Okay.
Or we could, if you want to propose, we propose those just to keep it on the same day. If you want to propose another day, we can do that. I just have to check to
I
make
could
sure.
do, yeah. Whatever works for the committee.
I prefer the morning, but I'm just one of this group.
Yeah, but with Jim having a conflict and being chair, I'm thinking we should really kind of.
I can make it work on Wednesdays at 8. I just can't do Mondays at 8 or Tuesdays at 8. That's my only challenge.
Wednesdays or Mondays are a challenge for me generally anyway, because it's Monday, clearly. I kept getting the phone, so Wednesday would be fine with me. Wednesday morning would be fine with me as well.
Good with me.
Anybody have an issue with Wednesdays at 8?
Works for me.
No.
All right.
Okay, perfect. All right, I gotta get off a second, guys.
Okay.
All right.
So if everybody's okay with Wednesdays at 8, is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Thursday, and we've got Fab Tech Team.
Okay. So we will set that up. We'll keep it on the third Wednesday. Is that all right?
Yes.
Okay. We will advertise that accordingly, and we will get those meetings set.
And can you just send us the updated list when that gets done?
Absolutely.
The meeting list, so I can put
Yes,
them.
we will. Yes, we will do that.
Perfect.
Steve, with Jim off, do you want me to take this to the end, or how do you want
Yes,
to handle it?
that I was going to say, Ed, you're getting your first responsibilities as vice chair.
Scary. Okay. Next item is old business, just from previous meetings, if there's any comments. I hear none. Committee comment or public comment? I hear none, and so we're going to move to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Negative? No? Great, I think we're done.
All right. So
All right.
it'll be a month from now on the third Wednesday at 8 o'clock that we'll get back together. We'll get that publicized. We'll get that out to everybody, the meeting schedule, so that you have it. So you can put it on your calendars. And I think that's it.
Steve,
Great.
can you give me a call
Great.
when you get off this?
I sure can.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
All right,
Thank you, everyone.
All right,
Have
bye.
a good day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.